information. Again, call our office at 501-372-6119 for more information. See you there. Thank you.
Attention entrepreneurs and business leaders, Remix Ideas is excited to announce the 5th annual Black Founder Summit on October 10th, 2024 at Ron Robinson Theater in Little Rock from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Come out and join us for a powerful day focused on doing good for Black companies to get access to capital. This year is your chance to connect with business leaders, policymakers, and fellow entrepreneurs, all dedicated to advancing Black entrepreneurship in Arkansas. Gaining actionable insight and innovative strategic help for your particular company in this marketplace today. Don't miss out. Register now to secure your spot at this transformative event. Visit blackfoundersummit.com to register today. That's blackfoundersummit.com to register today. This event is sponsored by U.S. Bank, Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, and the Arkansas Business Development Center.
Enrollment continues to increase at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. This semester, the school is experiencing its largest enrollment growth in the last 15 years, with more than 5,400 students enrolled this fall. Executive Admissions Ken Holderby says the university saw the largest increase in first-time freshmen and transfer students. He attributes the numbers to the school's efforts to make higher education more affordable.
For incoming freshmen, we have the half-off scholarship as long as they're admitted. They automatically qualify for the 50% off tuition. We also have the Trojan guarantee. You qualify for a Pell Grant, and after all of your aid is applied, then we cover the rest.
Almost 500 students have received the funding. This is the third consecutive year undergraduate enrollment has increased. While there was a spike in freshman and transfer numbers, the university saw a slight dip in graduate enrollment because of fewer international students. Holmby says outreach in the community played a big role in bringing more students to campus.
Making sure that we're getting to all those high schoolers and talking to students that are doing current enrollment and understanding how those credits transfer and give them a leg up when they come here. And then also our transfer students, right, our 2-year partners or went to the 4-year and want to move closer to home.
First-time freshman enrollment jumped by almost 29% from the fall of 2023 to the fall of this year. The combined undergraduate and graduate enrollment increased by 2% compared to last year. Support for this reporting was provided by Lumina Foundation. I'm Frida Ross, Arkansas News Service. Find our trust indicators at publicnewsservice.org.
With every voice and sing forever, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies resound of the rolling sea. shadow beneath thy heart, there will forever stand. Our
Yes, we are live right here at KABF 88.3 FM, where we are the voice of the people, bringing us in with the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. We'll be talking about that in just a minute. I'm super excited to have you here with us today. We have a special guest in the house. I cannot wait for this conversation in preparation for the last day to register to vote, which is next Monday. But I want to make sure that before we go any further, that we stop and say how grateful we are to you for your presence in this space. We realize and we recognize that if it were not for you, it would not be possible for KABF to be getting ready to celebrate 40 years being on air right here in the local community. We are one of only 12 local community radio stations, 100,000 watts, but we also stream globally because of technology. So you are listening to us from all over the world, and we are grateful for your presence. We are grateful for all of the ways that you show up. You show up during Pledge Drive. You show up when it's not Pledge Drive. You show up when we call you out for issues to talk about civil and civic engagement. You show up when we talk about community events. You show up all of the time. And however you show up, we want you to know that we are grateful for you. We would not be alive if it were not for you. Thank you so much. We do have in the house, I see you, Takia. I see you, Lo. I see you, Key, on the air, online. Those of you who are watching on Facebook, we see you, we see you, we see you. But I do want to make sure that we take space right now for your co-host to make sure that you know that he is in the house today. The pastor.
Yeah, that one got you, didn't it? It got you, see?
Toney Orr is in the house today.
Good-
Good morning.
good
Grand
morning.
rising to you.
Grand rising to you, Denise. And it is always a pleasure and always wonderful to be here on Tuesday mornings. Anytime we get opportunity to come before you and just talk about issues, talk about what's going on in the community and the world, to help educate, enlighten, and empower you in any way that we can. So thank you for stopping by all the way to the left at 88.3 FM, KBF Voice of the People.
We also have a special guest in the house today. I want to say, though, before we allow him to introduce himself in the way that he wants to introduce himself, that it is because of community that he is here. Kenneth Henderson reached out to me and said, hey, I need you to turn on Larry Hicks right now because Bob Nash is on the air and you need to hear this voice. And I was listening to the show and I was listening to the conversation and the subject of voting came up. And I said, wait a minute, I want to ask him some more questions. I appreciated the conversations, but I wanted to ask some more questions. And so because of that, because of Mr. Henderson reaching out, and then Dr. Anika Whitfield had a direct connect, I was able to get him on the air. So I'm super glad about that. And so I want to say that because when we said, hey, y'all need to know that Isabel Wilson will be in the house at the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts on last Wednesday, I saw y'all in the house. I saw Reverend Ryan Wright in the house. I saw Dana Dossett. Dossett. I saw Dana Dossett in the house. Dr. Karama Neal and her family, they were in the house. I saw Vicky. She was in the house. President of the school board. She was in the house. I saw Kwame Abdul-Bey. He was in the house. And of course, you know, black man politician.
He was in the house.
City Director Ward
Taking
1.
pictures.
Virgil Miller was in the house. And so I saw Kenneth Henderson in the house with his red shirt and his white hat on. It was so great to just be in conversation, to make sure that we are in spaces where we are centering Blackness in the overall experience of what it means to be human in America, in the world during this season. So for those of us who gathered in that space to listen to those words, there's a whole bunch of white folks in the space too. It was so good to be there and to see you and to break bread with you in the terms of conversation. And then to do that in the spirit of the Little Rock Nine, because we're celebrating the anniversary of the Little Rock Nine. So all of that means so much to us. So community is important. And also shout out to Hotep, because he was the one who sent me the video, the YouTube video of the song that we heard this morning that's grounding us in this space. So we could not do this work if it were not for community. So we are so grateful to you. Thank you so much for how you show up in this space. I want to take a moment before our EJI tidbit to let Bob Nash introduce himself in his own words. I got words, but they not be his words. So however you want people to know you, I know you've been on Larry Hicks, but now you want Community Voices. How do you want the people to know you today? Let us hear from you.
Thank you, and good morning to both of you. I am very happy to be here at KABF 88.3 100,000 watt station. I've always been a supporter of this station. I'm 77 years old, and through all of your 40 years, I've been supportive of you. And I want to encourage your listeners to also be supportive. I've been fortunate enough to spend about 50 years of my life in public service. I've worked for governors, Dale Bumpers, David Pryor. I've worked Bill Clinton when he was governor, and I also worked for Bill Clinton when he was president at the White House. I was the personnel director, where I helped him recruit people to run the country, to help make decisions to improve the lives of people all over the United States of America, and even have an impact across the nation. But I want you to know I am so happy to be here this morning at KABF to talk about this important issue of voting.
Thank you so much for being here. And this is usually I said, hey, I want to spend some time telling our story, letting people know how we met. But I've never met you before, so this is my first time, and I'm honored to be in your presence. I appreciate the work that you have done on behalf of all people, but I really want to appreciate you as a Black man and the work that you have done in this particular space. We always make sure that we center Blackness, and we know that Blackness is not the only experience, it's not the only human experience, but we want to center it in this space. So for you to say, yes, I'm willing to come on to have this conversation, I am so grateful for you to do that, and I really appreciate your presence. I want to make sure that we ground ourselves in the EJI tidbit. Every single Tuesday on Community Voices, we look to the EJI calendar. It is the Equal Justice Initiative that is led by attorney Brian Stevenson, who is doing the work particularly around youth in the criminal injustice system. I call it the injustice system, particularly around the injustice system, making sure that we can find, that we can work towards equity in that system to make sure that whatever the guidelines are, whatever the sentencing assignments or agreements or laws or policies are, that they are equitable for all people, particularly Black folks, because we know that there are disparities in the criminal injustice system as it relates to Black people, particularly Black youth. Oh, wait a minute, Tony, do you have an announcement? I just saw that paper you looking at.
I have a couple of them, but
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Tony, with your announcement.
okay.
Oh, I thought you were ready. He ain't ready, y'all.
Okay, I got two. One I have to pull up on my phone, but the first one this is from Carol Miles, who is the media director for DePaul, USA. They're having their second annual Evening of Jazz fundraising event. DePaul will host a fundraising event to raise funds and to raise awareness of the issues of homelessness. Proceeds go to support the Jericho Way Day Resource Center in Little Rock and Opportunity House in Pine Bluff. Both centers provide essential services to homeless citizens throughout Arkansas. World-class pianist and jazz virtuoso Cyrus Chestnut will headline the event. There will be performances by Rodney Block, Grady Nichols, and vocalist Jonathan Coran. This will take place Saturday, October 5th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. It will be held at the venue at West Wind, 7318 Winsome Drive in North Little Rock, Arkansas. For more information, you can call Carol Miles at 501-265-9241 or Carol Miles at DePaulusa.org.
And so while he's pulling up the other one, that made me remember that I needed to pull the book of announcements. We got plenty of announcements this morning. KABF 88.3 FM is celebrating its 40th anniversary celebration fundraiser party on October 19th, which is a Saturday, from 4 to 7 p.m. at St. Michael's Episcopal Church, 12415 Cantrell Road, 12415 Cantrell Road in Little Rock, 72223. There will be live music and food featuring a tribute to John Kane. This event is free. We are challenging everyone to donate $40 to commemorate the years of KABF serving the voice of the people. If you want to be a part of this monumental event, please call our office at 501-372-6119. The Arkansas State Claims Commission will hold hearings on October 2nd through 4th. That starts tomorrow through the 4th of 2024, beginning at 9 a.m. each day. The hearings will take place via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to observe the Zoom hearings may obtain the conference call details by calling the commission office and asking to speak with Sabrina Hike. If there are questions, please contact the commission office at 501-682-1619. The 10th annual Paul Lawrence Dunbar Community Festival, in partnership with the Dunbar Community Center, is celebrating 70 years strong and 10 years united on Saturday, October 5th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. There will be music, vendors, dancing, games. Bring your own seating. And this is happening at 1001 West 16th Street in Little Rock, 72202. Calling all vendors and food trucks. If you are interested in becoming a vendor at the Paul Lawrence Dunbar Community Festival on Saturday, October 5th from 10 to 5, please contact DunbarHA at gmail.com for inquiries. You can sign up now. The 2024 Six Bridges Book Festival is already in progress. That's over with. Let me see, that's over with. What else we got going on over here? Okay, the junior and high school bands invited on 10/5, October 5th of this year. Join the Battle of the Bands if you are interested. You can march to the beat from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Join the Dunbar Festival Showcase at the Dunbar Center at 1001 West 16th Street in Little Rock, 72202. Also coming up is the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office 4th Annual Community Fall Festival. It's happening on October 26th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 3201 West Roosevelt Road. For more information, call 501-340-6613. It is a free event. For more information, call 501-340-6613. And in the event of inclement weather, the alternative date is November 2nd of this year.
Wow, it's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And this is from the city of Alexander, the Alexander Fall Fest Vendors Warning. October 5th, 2024 at noon to 6 p.m. is set up. 11 a.m. will start the festival. It's going to be held at Alexander City Park. Food, music, games, hay rides, pumpkin patch, and more. No vendor setup fee is required. Vendors are asked to contribute one door prize, a minimum value of $25 for our raffle. For vendor information, or more information, contact Angela Griffin, City of Alexander, at 501-485-2588.
Okay, so now we're ready for our EJI tidbit. So we first grounded the conversation in the song Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is the Negro National Anthem, which was sung by 5 Black men. This was a cappella, no music. This is just their gifts and their graces and their talents with their voice as their instrument, singing this song, reminding us of our national anthem. And then here is what happened on October the 1st in 1939. On October 1st in 1939, police arrest a Black woman in Sampson County, North Carolina, for shouting a warning to a Black man as he was being pursued by a lynch mob. On October the 1st in 1939, police arrest a Black woman in Sampson County, North Carolina, for shouting a warning to a Black man as he was pursued by a lynch mob. I wanted to use that particular EJI tidbit for today because we are here to shout a warning, to sound the alarm, putting our bodies on the line no matter what happens to us, not because there is a lynch mob pursuing us, but yeah, you really could think of it as a lynch mob. The people are coming for your vote. Voter suppression is real in this country. So this mob of folks who don't want you to vote, regardless of who you are, but especially for those of us who are Black, that don't want you to vote, that want you to not realize the power of your vote, not realize the power of your voice, not realize the power of your presence at the ballot box. People are trying to keep you away, and we want to sound the alarm. We want to shout the warning. We want to let you know, hey, do not listen to them. You need to make your way to the vote, to the ballot box on this in November. And the last day to register to vote is October the 7th, which is next Monday, which is why it was so important for us to have Bob Nash so that we can have this comment right. Let me get before we move. Bob Nash, I can't click on it, but it says the past is just the future, going to different doors. Love, senior, quoting Ezekiel, because Mac usually calls in and says the same thing, that the past is just the future going through a different door, coming through a different door. And so I was listening to Bob Nash talking to Larry Hicks, and I really cannot remember verbatim what you said that made me say, hey, I want to reach out to him. Whatever you said reminded me that what I usually say to people is that I vote for no other reason. I vote for in every election I vote. Every election. I don't care if it's the primary, I don't care if it's special election, if it's the presidential election, I vote in every single election. And I do so because I am thinking about my ancestors. That's more than enough for me to vote. I don't care about whatever else is going on. That is enough for me. And so when I thought about that, I remember the pushback that I have received, particularly from Black folks, that says, hey, you're saying that you want to vote based on what your ancestors did and what they fought for. But do you really believe, Denise, that in 2024, that the system of voting that your ancestors were fighting for is the same system that we are facing today in 2024? And that's the question that I wanted to reach out to you, Bob Nash, and pose to you so that we can have a conversation about voting, what it means to you, about the power, about the presence, all of that, and what it is that you have to say.
Thank you so much. I think your listeners can tell that this station is the voice of the people because you're talking about issues that affect their lives every day. And when you talk about these two doors as it relates to voting, I remember my grandmother and my great-grandmother. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to meet, say, your great-grandmothers, but my great-grandmother talked to me about how she and her relatives, father, mother, uncles, aunts, and others were prevented from voting, and they couldn't vote, and they were lynched, killed, dragged, beat if they even thought about or tried to vote. That's what was going on back then. Now the door is different today because you don't have that much of that kind of stuff going on today. But there are different ways that people try to disenfranchise you from voting because they figure if you vote, you will look out for your best interest as opposed to their best interest, their being the power structure. So I committed to my great grandmother that anytime there was an opportunity to vote for whatever, school board, city council, county council, justice of the peace, governor, senator, congressman, president, I was going to vote. And I've never missed a vote in my 77 years of living, as long as I was 18 years old and eligible to vote. And I did that because of my respect for my great grandmother and what she asked me to do. She asked me to vote. She told me about how she couldn't vote and her siblings and others could not vote. And I committed to her and to myself that I was going to vote. Now, bringing that forward, today, there are so many issues that affect our lives today around the kitchen table, in our neighborhood, in our house. And if we don't vote, we're giving up the opportunity to make a difference in our lives. Too many young people say, oh, it doesn't make any difference. Let me tell you, it does make a difference. If you look at how slim a margin many races are won, you take one person here and one person there, and you go all across the listening audience of this station, which is very wide because you're streaming, you could make the difference in votes for many, many important positions. So I'm an advocate for telling you to get out there and vote. It does make a difference. It does make a difference in your lives, the lives of your family, the lives of your community. And just think how your grandmothers and great grandmothers, even though they may not be here today, are looking down and smiling and thanking you for voting today because they couldn't back then.
I just finished reading Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And one of the things that she says in the book that is extremely important for us as we think about the plight of Blackness in America, in the world, is that for many people, in order for them to make a change, in order for them to decide that they're going to do something different, in order for their decision-making process to be impacted in such a way that it shakes them to their core, that they say, wait a minute, let me look at things differently, they have to have some evidence. And so when you say, okay, well, it is important for us to vote, it is important for us to realize the power of our vote, can you point us to something of evidentiary value that shows us that because we voted, this is what happened. So people will have evidence as to why they're voting, not just us talking about it, but I can show you, I can prove to you that because of your vote, this is what was attained. And maybe that will help people make a decision to vote.
Thank you. You know, for us to get the right to vote, it took elected officials. Let's go back to Lyndon Baines Johnson and doing the Civil Rights Act, and and he was elected with a significant amount of African American and other people of color and women. Or incidentally, women could not vote a while back, regardless of your color. You couldn't vote. So this is important for you too. Now, because of the vote for Lyndon Baines Johnson, we passed the Voting Rights Act, and we were able to vote without having to go through all kinds of hoops. That's one example. Another example was we would not have the first Black president were it not for African Americans voting in large numbers to elect Barack Obama, who put in place programs in housing and healthcare, particularly healthcare. They call it Obamacare, which is still around today. There are some people who want to get rid of Obamacare. But if you vote for people who are supportive of healthcare, and I'm not talking about any particular candidate, I'm talking about voting for your best interest. So that's a couple of examples, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other examples all across your listening audience, whether they be at the state level, the federal level, or the local level. Take for an example, school integration. Listen, were it not for the president appointing Supreme Court members in the past, not today, but in the past, you wouldn't have had significant school integration where our kids could get a good education, go on and get a college education, and go on and get a good job and take care of their families. But there are hundreds of other examples of why voting is so important. And let me end one more. I mentioned women. Today, well, previously, women could not vote just because you were a woman. Today, you can. But guess what? The individuals in power now are trying to say to a woman, we have more control over your life than you do, regardless of whether or not your life is in danger or not. So you, I'm talking particularly about women now, whatever color you are, get out there and vote if you want to make sure that you maintain control over your life as opposed to some elected official who doesn't even know you.
And so, Bob Nash, you're talking about the votes that we had, the votes that we that kept us moving forward. But I think, Toney, you can also speak to the fact that we voted to keep things from happening, because you weren't you stomping in Georgia? Was it?
Yeah, with Yoir.
So there's sometimes when we vote to keep things from happening, and that's just as important as what you are saying, Bob Nash, about making sure that we are voting to move us forward. But there are some things that sometimes we need to vote so that we can keep things from happening to us. You want to talk about that too?
Yes, and so one thing people need to realize is that if voting wasn't so important, you would not have all these laws, all these regulations, even here in the state of Arkansas, on electronic signatures, which makes voting easier. The state election commission was like, no, we can't have that, because it opened the door for people to vote. If it wasn't so important, they would be trying to stop it. And when you look at the history of voting after the Civil War with Reconstruction, Black elected officials were all over the South. And it frightened the power structure. It's that, hey, they got power. Voting is about power and who's going to wield it and who are we going to give it to. And, when you look at what's going on now, it may not be a lynch mob, it may not be people threatening you, but they're doing it in such a way to intimidate you as voters that a lot of Black people are like, man, my vote ain't gonna work. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna mess with it. But like you said, Denise, if for nothing else, if you're not gonna, to vote for your ancestors, but also for nothing else, you don't want to lose ground. You want to continue to gain ground. And if you look at some of the laws that are being passed now, it's taken away a lot that we have gained. They have gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1964. They have gotten rid of affirmative action. They have gotten rid of Roe versus Wade. They have, they're cutting all the different, even here in Arkansas, they're cutting Medicaid, Medicare. So all these things that we as Black people have attained are now being pulled away. And so if nothing else, you want to vote to maintain those things, because if not, and when the question was asked about, can you show something tangible? I'm going to tell you something that's very tangible that voting did for Black people. When President Obama got voted into office, for years, for about 20 years before President Obama got voted into office, there was the Black Farmers Reparation that stood in Congress for 20 years. I think President Clinton initially put it out there, and it just sat there. Just sat there. When President Obama got elected, and we had the elected House and the Senate, he pushed it through, and it's still being distributed. They just did another round. This helped so many families who suffered through that were able to reap the benefits of this bill and start on a path of whether it's generational wealth, but move them to do some things that needed to happen in their lives. So you can see a tangible effect of voting.
That's absolutely correct. You know, people don't know it, but
Hold on just a minute, Mr. Nash. Eric, KBF 88.3 FM. Thank you for calling. This is Community Voices.
Thank you. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning, Ezekiel.
Listen up, I'm well. To carry on with this man, folks say that votes are worth, I said votes are fighting. If you can recall, during one presidential election, there was a presidential candidate who was seeking help in a state, Georgia, and he asked not for money for campaigning, but for votes. He said, "Like this bill, excellent votes." There's a trial going on back there right now. Money. He asked for the votes. Now that's how valuable votes are. A person can just put it in perspective. American votes don't count. Should come to an end. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. He didn't ask for money. He asked for, if I could just come in, this many votes. And that's what takes. So it's not something that you make up and check on. You didn't ask him. Didn't ask for his help. You didn't ask to keep insurance protection. He asked for votes. He said, I can just get X amount of votes. I'm just looking for this many votes. So that's how important it is. And the question that Ms. Nash asked, I had an opportunity to meet two of my great grandparents on the mother's side. I'm currently great man. My grandfather's mother and my grandfather's mother was lynched in Warren, Arkansas. I like to book about the lynching. But the factual, it's very important to be able to vote. To be able to vote and to not vote is almost a slap in the face of relatives, friends, and neighbors, ancestors long before this nation. But I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity. You got people.
Let me get this comment in from Lo. It says voting is just a part of the process. Those elected and who are serving in office must be held accountable to the people and the people's interest and agenda. We tend to think of elections as a popularity contest instead of the issues and results that affect Black lives. So voting is important, but it's only part of the process. So once the person is voted in, we have to also make sure that we are holding that person accountable to the moment with you, Bob Nash, because one of the questions one of the issues that always comes up with me when I'm talking to people, particularly Black folks, who say, hey, this is not the same system, why should my vote doesn't matter? And Toney, both of you, Bob Nash and Toney, you got to talk to us about some tangible ways that we can see how important our vote is, what it has cost us, what it has done for us. But I also hear people saying things like, well, let's think about when you talk about voting, what presidential administration has censored Black folks in their policies once they get into office? Like Max said, there are some people who actually they woo us, they want to cater to us, they want to do whatever it is, they ask for it, they request it, they come to our churches to get our votes, they do everything that they can to get our votes. But then once they get in office, what do they do, particularly for Black folks? Because when we think about hate bills and we think about hate crimes, Black people have been killed because of their color at the beginning of this country. And yet recently we saw that when there were Asians who were being killed, there was an Asian hate crime bill like immediately. When we talk about reparations, there have been reparations for people who were members of the Jewish Holocaust, for people who were members of the First Nation folks who were slaughtered and forcibly removed from their land. But we still have not gotten reparations for Black folks. So when we talk voting, when we talk about these presidential administrations, what is it that we can say that they are doing for Black people that would earn them the Black vote? Can you speak to that?
Well, first of all, let me just say that voting is just one piece of it. And not only do you vote one time, you must vote every time there's an election. And politicians understand that. And so the way you hold them accountable is for them to know that your vote is going to count, because you're going to vote time and time and time again. That is the main thing that gets the attention of any politician who doesn't want to be accountable for what they promise. The second thing is, what I think your listeners have to do is to listen to KABF, because what you want to know is what's going on in your community, in your state, in your region. And you do that by listening to stations like this that talk about the important issues, so you can communicate with your elected officials. And believe me, communication makes a difference. I've been on that side. I've worked for governors and I've worked for the president. You listen to people, but when people don't speak, you don't have as much accountability or impact as you did if they were hearing from you. So number one, they know you're going to be voting every time, and we need to vote more in this state, in this region than we do now, because it's the voting percentage is lower than it is in the majority of the states in this country. So again, be informed, communicate with the elected official after they are elected, and listen to community resources like this to keep up with the issues that you have to communicate with them on.
I think one thing we have to look at it, Mr. Nash, you alluded to it earlier. When you look at President Johnson, his focus, he had a focus on Black America, and what he pushed through. He sacrificed his to make sure that the Civil Rights Act was passed, ensure the Voting Rights Act was passed. He wanted to see a change, and he wanted to see a difference. After he left office, at that, I think Black voter turnout was one of, I won't say it was at its highest, but it was one of the highest times that Black people started voting. And then it tailed off. And I think part of it is when you don't understand the past, you don't understand your present or your future. And so when we start to vote now, we and because this, here in Arkansas is one of the lowest voters turnout, because there's this apathy. It's like, nothing is going to change. Well, if you don't push for change, then nothing will change. And one thing that I always think about, and because of the work I do, I always think about in my mind, that elected officials work for me.
That's exactly right.
I'm their employer. So if they're not doing what I believe is a good job, is an adequate job, or a manageable job, then I have the right to fire them. And if we take that attitude and say, you know what, I don't like what they're doing, so let me find somebody else that can do this job. And I think that's one of the things that we have to, one thing that we consider and start to look at. And I think it will change, it may change how we think about our elected officials and how we vote.
Go ahead, Mr. Nash.
Okay, thank you. It looks like it says Mike muted, maybe.
No, you're fine.
I'm fine, okay. Elected officials, some of them think that they know everything. They don't. They need to know what they are. We need to know what others are. And do that by phone, by letter, by going to their offices, by going to the meetings they have in their districts when they have meetings, going to city council meetings, quorum court meetings, and all those things. Do that. They don't know everything. What they need to know is what's important to you. So we need to get out there. The last thing one of the things I'll say is, don't let perfection be the enemy of practicality. Perfection means everything you do is must be perfect. Be practical. Let's make sure that they do as much as they can based on what your needs are. Again, you're never going to say, "Oh, that person's perfect. They're doing everything." Not gonna happen.
I want to make sure we get these comments in. I see you, Mayor Lisa Hicks Gilbert. Good morning to the good people, she says. We got to get you on the show, Mayor. We need to get you on the show. And I want to get this comment in from Lo. He says they passed an Asian bill. They passed an LGBTQ plus bill. They passed a Jewish bill. When will a black bill be passed? And that's the question that Lo asked. And that brings me to my comment about how, Toney, you said Lyndon Johnson did this work where he was centering Blackness and he put his career on the line. But he put his career on the line because there was pressure from the Black community. There was pressure from Black folks that said, look, if you're going to be the president and if you're going to be for all of the people, then this is what our agenda is and this is what we are pushing. And I think that we forget, because we have so much talk in the media about this being a democracy. We do not live in a democracy. We live in a republic. And what the republic says is that I am going to vote for you to represent me. And so that's the design that we have. We vote for politicians to represent us. And when they get in office, they're supposed to be our voice. And so some of us, when we vote for them, we step back because we say, okay, well, now that you're in there, we're expecting you to do the right thing. We're expecting you to do what we want you to do. We're expecting you to do. So when Bob Nash says, you got to tell them what to do. You got to make sure that you're holding their feet to the fire because they don't know without your voice. And so when Lo says we can't just depend on the voting process, we got to be engaged every step of the way, making sure that you feel my presence, making sure that I'm holding you accountable, making sure that you're doing what I ask you to do, making sure that you're fulfilling your promises. Even if you're not perfect, I want to make sure that you are towing the line that you got in office on, because you said all this stuff to get in office. Now, what are you doing once you are getting in there? So this process of civic engagement, voting is important, but it does not start nor end there. It is an overall process that we have to be diligent and vigilant about, especially as Black folks. It looked like he wanted to say something, Mr. Nash.
Yes. I was just going to say amen to what you just said. Some people go out and vote and they don't say anything else or do anything else until the next time, and maybe even not vote the next time. That's a problem. And for those of you who voted, registered to vote and voted several years ago, and maybe you missed 2 or 3 elections, you can get kicked off the rolls. That's a practical thing. You're not registered. You think you're registered? No. You missed about 3 elections. I think that's the case in most cases. You're thrown off. But the main point I want to make is it is not just enough to vote. You got to communicate and know what the issues are. Be informed. Listen to this radio station. Read the newspaper. Look at the news and figure out. And then you know for yourself personally what's going on in your community, whether it's housing needs, healthcare needs, crime, etc. And you want to vote for people who have talked about those issues and have promised to do something about it, and then to follow up and make sure they do.
Another thing is that we have to do research on these candidates. We have to get these candidates. And sometimes, if there's an opportunity, I know it's difficult for a lot of people because of circumstances, but if you get an opportunity to go to a forum or go to a town hall meeting, or especially local, to go and be in front of these candidates, to get a feel of their candidates, because 98%, 98 to me, this is my opinion, 98% of people who are running for elected office. So you have to figure out where is the con and where is the truth, because there's some truth in, there's some truth. What's the saying? There's truth in the lie. There's some truth somewhere. You have to figure out which one, because you're right, Denise. It has become a popularity contest, because if you go back and you look at the records of people, you look at their research, when you look at what they have done, then you get a better idea of when they're saying something. Does this line up with what they talked about what they've done in office, or this is just something that they're just saying just to get your vote. And you have to be able to figure it out.
Well, let me say this. You do have to do your research. And very frankly, it's not that hard. It used to be. But today, everybody has an iPhone or, and you can just put up in your browser the name of an official, and you can find their record pretty easy. So do that. Now, I've been a public servant, not elected, but appointed for many, many, many years. And very frankly, I have a lot of respect for elected officials. I really do. It's not an easy job. Some people are in it and shouldn't be in it. Some people are in it and need to stay in it and do well. I'm not as much of a pessimist as you are about elected officials. I do have a great deal of respect for them, but they have to be held accountable. And you do, and we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to do that. And if we don't, people can go awry. But again, I'm a proponent of people running for office and serving the people.
Well, here's what Lowe says. Don't forget the $1 billion payoff that President Johnson accepted from the military-industrial complex to continue the war. Don't forget the $1 billion payoff that President Johnson accepted from the military-industrial complex to continue the war. And I know, Bob Nash, with all due respect, that you worked for Governor Bill Clinton.
Yes.
And so I take issue with some of the policies that President Bill Clinton put in office, particularly around the Crime Bill Act that affected Black men and Black people in particular. And just, the mass incarceration exploded under his administration. And so I think that even though we can say that we have respect for elected officials, we also have to say, but wait a minute. There are some times when they have let us down. There are some times when they have pushed us backwards. There are some times when they have injured us. And so there are some things that these elected officials do that affect us for generations. And then we have to make sure that we are calling them out on that. And so these kinds of shows, that's what we're about. We're about saying, hey, there are two sides of the coin. Yes, you can say, I absolutely am in favor of people running for office. And I want to make sure that you know that sometimes what you do in office is something that we're going to call you to account for, because it is detrimental to our communities. And so that is the space that we try to create here, where we lift up both of those voices and we hold them in tension and we push people to think about it and to think deeply about it. And so I want to say, if you're going to think deeply about it, and if you're going to do your research, you got to push beyond the media. When you say you want to watch the news, you got to push beyond the media. You need to read some books. Some of you all are not reading. When I finished Dr. Joy DeGreer's book on post-traumatic slave syndrome, she had a bibliography in the back. And when I went through the bibliography, I pulled up my notes app so that I can put in all of the books that she had on her bibliography. And there were only 2 books on the bibliography that I already had on my shelf. So she had a bibliography, let's just say it was 15 books, and I only had 2. So look how much information I have not attained because I'm not reading. I wasn't even aware of the books. So we got to go beyond looking at the media. We got to go beyond Facebook. We got to go beyond TikTok. We got to go beyond Instagram. And we got to begin to read this information, because like Bob Nash said, this is a new day. It used to be where this information, you couldn't access it. But now we've got access to more information that can help us make better decisions. And we're not telling you who to vote for, but we are telling you to vote. And we are reminding you that next Monday is the absolute last day to register to vote. I've got registration forms in my car. You can hit me up at 228-236-7440. Have car will travel to wherever you are to get you registered to vote in the November election for whoever you want to vote for. But make sure you are doing your research and you are voting for people who align with your own personal values.
And
Go ahead, please.
And also, there was an injunction so that Get Loud Arkansas is back to doing electronic signatures. We don't know how long it's gonna last, but they will accept them during this stay.
So how can we do that, Tommy? How can we do it?
Go to getloudarkansas.org, and they will.
And you can register to vote online.
You can register to vote online.
Let me talk about early voting for a second. A lot of people don't like to stand in lines. Well, I've stood in the voting line for 2 and 3 hours, beginning because of what I talked about earlier with my great grandparents. But if you want to try to avoid those long lines, you can vote early. Early voting starts on October 21st to November the 4th. You can go, and those lines are shorter. And you can go and vote in libraries, community centers, and other places, depending upon where you are. In Pulaski County, for an example, there are about 10 or 15 different places. Roosevelt Thompson Library, Hillary Clinton Children's Library, and on and on and on and on. So early voting, October 21st to November the 4th. And that'll keep you from standing in line. But whatever you do, we're not saying who to vote for, but go out and vote because these issues are complicated. Now, I do remember, Reverend Denise, when I was sitting in the Oval Office, listening to elderly people talk about crime in their neighborhoods. None of these problems are easy to solve. And several of them saying, you got to do something about crime in our neighborhoods for our grandmothers and our grandfathers and our aunts and uncles and cousins. Anyway, no perfect answers. We all have to work hard, but the way we do it is listen to KABF, be informed on the issues, vote every election, be informed.
One thing I want to ask, one question real quick. Early voting, you don't, you can go to any early voting site and vote.
Yes.
It's only on election day where you have to go to your assigned.
Polling place.
That's
Okay,
exactly right.
okay, that's
It's
what I
on
want.
your registration card.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Good
So the
point.
benefit is early
To vote.
voting.
And
Yes, it
vote,
is.
and the early voting starts when, Mr. Nash?
It starts October 21st,
October
and it
21st.
goes until November 4th.
It goes to November 4th, and so that means that election day is November 5th,
Yes, ma'am.
and everybody needs to vote. Thank you all so much for joining us Hotep says Johnson did not pass those bills out of the kindness of his heart. I want to make sure that we are staying true to the facts right here at KBF 88.3. Mr. Nash, thank you so much for joining us on today. Thank you so much, Toney, for your contribution to this conversation. Thank you for those of you who are online, those of you who are listening. We appreciate you right here at Community Voices. Now, we do not want you to touch that dial because you've got 2 hours of jazz coming up that's going to feed your body, feed your soul, feed your mind, feed your spirit so that you can you can be in a better position to think about how you're going to vote starting October 21st, which is when early voting starts, all the way up until November 5th, which is election day. And we're going to get you started with Sweet Honey in the Rock singing We Are. Listen to these words. You need to hear them. Your girl Lola is right at the door waiting for you. We'll see y'all next time.
How are you?